All right. What a great way to start our day. Dig up old wounds of being rejected. It's funny, like this half of the room, most people sat down a lot faster than that half of the room. We don't like this question. It's a tough topic. And to be honest, I kind of debated back and forth what stories I could tell and also what biblical example we'll use, but we'll get into that. I think there is some good things for us this morning. A couple of stories to tell you that I felt rejection from early age on. The earliest I can remember was middle school. You know when you line up and there's the two captains, or you're getting picked for the kickball team. Okay, everyone else is picked except for me and two other kids, the three of us standing up against the wall. Clear as day, I know exactly where I was when this happened. And I remember them not even picking us. They just said, you guys can join whatever team you want. It wasn't even last pick, it was the non-pick rejection wound. You fast forward a little bit, like that first big breakup where somebody I'm dating says, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be with you. It's like, oh my gosh, that just was painful. You take it personally. There was also, fast forward a little bit into my young adult life. You're not going to believe that this is a true story, but it is a true story. I went down to St. Louis with my brother and some friends, and we all tried out for American Idol. Yeah, I didn't make it. And I had two song choices, and one of them was the Menards theme song. True story. You save big money. They cut me off, and they're like, no, you're not going through. True story. That was a long drive home. There was also a job interview. Yeah, that was right before I started working here, about 8 years ago. I had a conversation with a guy. It was a company I was really excited about. I love what they do. I wanted to be a part of it. Set up an interview. I go to the interview. I'm all dressed up. I'm sitting in the waiting room. 20, 30 minutes goes by. Nobody comes to get me. And I go up to the receptionist. I'm like, am I here at the right time for the interview? And they're like, what's your name? I told my name. And they're like, why are you here? I was like, for the interview. And they're like, oh, there's no interview scheduled today. And the guy that set it up didn't even remember it. I just felt like, oh. I was like, yeah, that really stunk. And then I start thinking of more stories, and probably some that, in all honesty, I don't think I'm ready to share here, because I'm still in the middle of some of those. And rejection is a really powerful thing. It's really difficult to think through how much that runs deep for each of us in our lives. So where can we turn? What kind of biblical advice can we get about this rejection experience that all of us face so often? Well, we talked with our teaching team the last 2 weeks, and we landed on Joseph. Now, Joseph is a really long story. In fact, it's one of the longest narratives in the whole Bible. And so I will be skimming, and if you're going to try to follow along, I'll frustrate you because I'm not going line by line. But we're going to do a quick survey of Joseph's life, and I do believe there's some things in his life that we can both relate to and also learn from. So if you want to try to read along, feel free to open your Bibles to Genesis 37, but I will have most of the text here on the screen. For me, one of the beliefs I had when I was rejected continually is this. I started believing this about myself. The closer you get, the more you will see the ugly parts in me, and then you will leave me. And it started with a few situations, it turned into a pattern, and then it started to turn into a belief. And I don't know what it is for you, but I'd be willing to bet there's probably parts of your life that as you experience the really painful experience of rejection, some beliefs also started to form. Without paying attention, we start to live by these beliefs, so we start to incorporate them into our lives. We'll see the temptation to do that for Joseph and yet some of his other choices. All right, Genesis 37. Joseph is 17 years old. He's tending the flock with his brothers. Now, he has a lot of brothers. He has 11 brothers, and he's one of the youngest. and Joseph is tending the flock, and he brought back this bad report about the brothers to Dad. Now, their dad is called Jacob, but many times after God changes his name to Israel, it'll kind of be interchanged. So sometimes you'll see Jacob, sometimes Israel. Same guy, same dad to these 12 sons. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than all of the other sons because he was the son of his old age. Maybe he didn't think he was going to have a son anymore, and then along comes Joseph. And he made him a multicolored tunic. Now, all the sons got a tunic from Dad. Everybody gets a coat. Dad gives a coat to every son. Joseph gets a second one, and it's got all these fancy colors on it. So you can imagine the reaction of the brothers around that as they see this happen to Joseph. Verse 4, and his brothers saw that their father loved Joseph more than all the rest of the brothers, so they hated him, and they could not speak to him on friendly terms. They couldn't even talk to him. And then Joseph had a dream. Oh boy, here we go. The plot thickens. Joseph has this dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, please, listen to this dream which I had. For behold, and can you imagine like getting the older brothers around? Guys, I got this great dream. We're standing in a field. We're binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf stood up and also remained standing, and behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf. And then his brother said, are you actually going to reign over us? Or are you really going to rule over us? Said so they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Joseph goes on and has another dream. Same deal. He tells the brothers, gets them together, and it said that their jealousy for him grew even more. They were angry, they did not like him, didn't want to hear from him, and their jealousy grew from him even more. Then one day, Jacob, the dad, sends Joseph to go check on the brothers in a field. Okay, he sends them out, go check on them, see if they need anything, come back and give me a report. So Joseph goes out. When they saw him from a distance, and the brothers saw Joseph from a distance, and before he came closer to them, they plotted against him to put him to death. Okay, we're going to kill our little brother. They said to one another, here comes the dreamer. Now, let's come and kill him and throw him into one of the pits. And we will say, a vicious animal devoured him. We'll make up a story. And we will see what will become of his dreams. So Reuben, the older brother, convinced the other brothers, don't kill him. Let's just throw him in a pit. And then he was planning secretly later to come rescue Joseph, get him out of the pit, and we'll get through this conflict. Well, verse 23, it came about when Joseph reached the brothers, they took off his tunic. They stripped Joseph of his tunic, the multicolored tunic that was on him, the one that was unique to him. And they took him and threw him in the pit. Now the pit was empty without any water in it. I mean, at first you can imagine Joseph's probably in some disbelief, like, okay, I know they're mad. I know they didn't like the dreams. I know they don't like me, but this just is probably a prank. We'll just let this play out. And it gets quiet. He doesn't hear the voices anymore. Maybe it turns into quite a long time. All right, guys, joke's up. Starts yelling. Nothing. No response. Brothers are not coming to his rescue. Okay, joke's up, guys. It's been real funny. It's time. Let's go. I get it. You don't like me. But he's just sitting there empty in this empty pit. So when you start talking about the gift or gifts that we can find in rejection, to be honest, most of these don't sound very fun. But I do come to believe that they're extremely essential for our lives and for our walk with Jesus. First one, finding the gift in rejection, the first one would be ground yourself in God. I don't know if you've been at a place like that where Joseph was, where it just seems like all the things that make you, you, and all your sense of security and belonging and family and all these things, it's gone. And you're alone, and you don't have anything left. That's a good time to ground yourself in the Lord. What does God say about me? Who does he say that I am? He gave me the dreams, right? I thought he gave me a dream. This is not coming true. This is not my brother is bowing down before me. I don't get it. He had nothing left, and I think that was a perfect opportunity for him to ground himself in God. And I hope and pray that that would happen as well for each of us. It comes to mind when you feel like you have nothing left. Okay, my identity is not in the coat or my brothers or even my family, as it should be. That stuff's gone right now. I need to reground myself in the Lord. Verse 26, and Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it for us to kill Joseph and cover up his blood? Instead, let's sell him. We're not going to lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, he's our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. So it was his idea to sell him as a slave. Verse 28. So some traders are passing by. They pull him out and lifted Joseph out of the pit, and they sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they had brought Joseph into Egypt. They pulled him out. Can you imagine that moment? He hears the voices again. The brothers are on. Okay, good. Finally, they're going to come get me out of this. Somebody, either, I don't know how deep it was, a rope or at least their hand, somebody reaches down and had to have grabbed Joseph's hand again. There's this moment where you think this might be the rescue. This might be a change of heart. This might be where they say, yeah, we shouldn't have done that. Joke's over. Let's move on. And they actually continue in their plan to sell him. Their younger brother, they sold him as a slave, maybe to never see him again. Again, you can start to imagine what Joseph is going through as he's trying to process all these things happening. Maybe on that travel across the country over toward Egypt, maybe it's on that travel that he has a moment where he starts realizing, like, this is for real. I didn't think they had it in them. Like, I thought they were just upset, but they actually did this. Maybe you've had a moment like that, where the rejection, like, settles in. And you now start to realize, like, no, this is for real. This is really happening. This person is doing everything they can to never see me again, to not be around me. It's really painful. Rejection does a number on us humans. I think it might be one of the most powerful experiences that a human can have, is being rejected. We read stories and research about babies, even in the womb, where if they experience some type of rejection, where it's not safe, protected, and cared for, that it affects them the rest of their life in one way or another. It messes with us. It's not the way it ought to be. We hear research and stories of toddlers that if a parent continues to reject a child or ignore them or abandon them, and all the things that need to happen between kid and mom and dad don't happen, that affects us. It happens to some of us. Oh, and then middle school. I mean, that's the worst. Talk about rejection in middle school. It's like your whole world is social. And being accepted and finding your belonging and where you fit into the picture of the people around you. It's such a deep desire that we are all built with. And yet when it doesn't happen the way it should, we have these fractured pieces of trying to figure out who we are in the middle of lots and lots of rejection. I suspect that those of us in the room, when we start to think about it, we have quite a list. A friend that rejected you. Many of you had a spouse reject you for one reason or another. Maybe a job, maybe somebody that you were close with, family, cuts you off, they're done with you. I think about sometimes you can get rejected from people in your hometown, or a person, or a home church, or somebody that saw you for who you were and said, no thanks, I'm done with you. Sometimes people describe their experiences in different cultures, different races that have been rejected. To deal with this feeling is common amongst us humans, and I know that it has an effect on us. So I'm asking this question, how do we respond in rejection? But I also know that this runs super deep, and we cannot just put a Band-Aid on it. I can't just give you fast answers. Here, read this Bible verse. It would be ignoring that the depth of rejection and how it's affected us is really deep. How do we respond? I don't know sometimes. It's really difficult. There's stories that I shared with you, and there's stories I'm not sharing with you because I'm still in them. And I don't have resolve yet, and I don't have a great path forward, and it feels like an injustice. It feels like I want God to make a case on my behalf, exonerate me, say my side of the story, and it's not happened. And it's unresolved. It's painful. And then I think what we do is we don't want to feel that feeling again. So I don't know if you're anything like me, but I start working really hard to make sure that's never going to happen again. I'm going to stitch together things that I can say and I can do to protect it. There's no way that I'd be vulnerable enough that you would actually reject me and I would have to feel that level of rejection again. I don't want that. So I play it safe. And I have my wall up around other people. I suspect all of us have times where if we were to pause and be honest with ourselves, so many decisions in our day are around not wanting to feel that rejection again. It's painful. It's really painful. Sherry said it last week. There's shalom, which is peace and wholeness and the fullness of who God is and our peace with Him. And when shalom is shattered, we try to find that shalom again. Sometimes with the Lord, it's redemptive, and sometimes we're so desperate and we're not turning to God, we're trying to recreate shalom on our own terms. It doesn't work. We're trying to take these shattered pieces of shalom and piece them together on our own, and it's not working. We attempt to do those things on our own. Why all this? Why is rejection so powerful? I think it's because we are meant for relationship. You and I are designed, by design, we're supposed to have a relationship with God and a relationship with other people that's loving, protected, covenantal, sacrificial, safe, trustworthy. And as you know, all of these relationships are fractured one way or another. So how are we stirring this deep longing we have for good relationship, and yet the reality of rejection is in all of our stories? So we have Joseph. He's sold as a slave. He's heading to Egypt. We pick up the story, chapter 39, and the Lord was with Joseph. Okay, number one, remember the grounding? He grounded himself in the Lord, and the Lord was with Joseph. And he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his master Potiphar, the Egyptian. Potiphar saw that the Lord was with Joseph and that the Lord made all that he did prosper in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight, and became his personal servant. And he made him overseer over his house and put him in charge of all that he owned. Cool, right? Things are looking up for Joseph, right? Well, as some of you might be familiar with the story, Potiphar's wife tries to seduce Joseph. And Joseph flees, but somehow his coat, another coat, is left behind, and she hangs on to it, and then she makes up the story that it was actually flipped, that he tried to seduce her, and that she screamed and all this. And so Potiphar hears that side of the story, sees the coat. The coat's used against him, again, in a lie, and he throws Joseph in prison. He doesn't want to hear the other side of the story. So here's Joseph in prison, falsely accused. Again, all these seemingly righteous feelings of wanting to be justified. Hear my side of the story. And how does he respond? He keeps regrounding himself in God. So yes, we all need to ground ourselves in God when it feels like nothing's left. And then it happens again and again and again. So if you find yourself desperate, if you find yourself like you don't feel like there's much left, there's nothing left. Let this be a reminder that you can ground and reground yourself in the Lord. We keep reading in the story. In prison, there's a cupbearer and a baker for Pharaoh. They both make him mad, so he throws them in prison. They're there with Joseph. Eventually, they have dreams. Joseph says, through my prayer, through my relationship with the Lord, essentially, God would give me the interpretation for your dreams. So he interprets them. They both come true. One goes on to work for Pharaoh again, but they forget about Joseph. He stays in prison. So then we have Pharaoh. A few years later, we read that he has some dreams. And so you might remember part of the story if you've read this before. Pharaoh pulls Joseph out of he calls the dungeon, the prison. He said, I've had a dream, but no one can interpret it, and I've heard it said about you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. And Joseph reminds him, it has nothing to do with me. God will give Pharaoh an answer for his own good. Pharaoh tells his dreams to Joseph. Joseph interprets the dreams. It's about a warning that God is giving Pharaoh about years to come. You're going to have years of plenty, but then there's going to be a famine. If you're wise, prepare for those years. So Joseph interprets it and then says, I have this idea. We should save up all the food we can for 7 years, and then when the famine hits, we'll be set to go. We'll provide for our country. And later we learn it actually provides for more than just their country. It provides for a lot of different people. Genesis 41:41. Pharaoh also said to Joseph, see, I've placed you over all the land of Egypt. So Pharaoh took off his signet ring from his hand, put it on Joseph's hand, and then he clothed him another clothing, another tunic, another robe in garments of fine linen, and put the gold necklace around his neck. So this keeps happening. And he had him ride in his second chariot. He proclaimed ahead of them, bow the knee. So people are going before Joseph saying, bow down, Joseph's coming. And he placed him over all the land of Egypt. And you might think at this point, okay, I got the new coat, I got the authority, people are having to bow before me. He might have stopped there and thought maybe this is the fulfillment of the dream that God gave me when I was 17. But he didn't. This was not the fulfillment of that dream. When you think about it, he was 17 years old when God gave him the dream. He's 30 years old when he stands before Pharaoh. And you would think that God would give you like all these things to fruition about the dream right away. It didn't happen that way. There's at least 13 years that we know about between God giving the dream and it looking like everything's going backwards. This is not what he said. I thought God said that all these things would happen. Even in this moment, it seems like this is coming to fruition, and it's not. But I want to remind you that God still provided for Joseph even before the fulfillment of everything that he had promised. That's another gift in our rejection. God's provision isn't dependent on my resolve. You might be in the middle of a story that's not resolved yet, or the circumstances that are not resolved yet. God still provides, and we give him glory and honor for it. It'd be easy for us to try to attempt to provide for ourselves. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to figure out my own plan. I take care of myself. No one else is going to do it. Joseph didn't have that attitude. He continually entrusted himself to the Lord, and the Lord provided for him in all ways. I'm going to keep skimming through the story. Joseph ran the plan. He collected a bunch of food over the 7 years of plenty, and he was ready. The whole country was ready for the famine. Now, Jacob, back in the homeland, was hearing about the fact that Egypt had food. Didn't know anything about Joseph. For all he knew, he was dead. The brothers had dipped that cloak in blood and said, take a look, is this Joseph's? Yep, that's Joseph. So he thought he was dead. So then we get to this part of the story, Genesis 42. Now, Joseph was the ruler over all of Egypt, and he was the one who sold the grain to all the people of the land. So when the brothers came, when Jacob sent the brothers to come get grain, Joseph's brothers came and bowed down to him with their faces on the ground. And when Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but they did not recognize him. Can you imagine? This is probably the moment, at least for me, where I would say, I told you so. I'm Joseph. Let me tell you what happened. And like flex that a little bit, gloat a little bit, like, yeah, like I got this. Look at what I've done. I hung on for my dear life, and look where I am now. I think in my flesh, I'd probably want to say things like that. What did Joseph do? His brothers are literally bowing down before him. He bites his tongue. He doesn't say any of that stuff. There's another couple chapters which we won't dive into, but the next few chapters is this elaborate plan where Joseph has his brothers there in Egypt buying grain from him, and he's strategizing and he's trying to find a way to find out, is dad still alive and is he okay? What about the younger brother Benjamin? Is he still alive? And so after he hears about it, then he's finding ways to send them back, but then send them with money and food and a means to come back, so that when they come back, then there's all this back and forth. So there's this whole drawn out thing. The whole time, Joseph never reveals to them who he was. He's grown up now. They don't recognize him. They for all they knew, they thought he was dead as well. There's multiple points of this story where they're bowing down before him, and he has authority for revenge. He could have done that in return. He could have sold them as slaves. Yeah, this is what you did to me, that's what I'm going to do to you. He could have at least stood up and had a big old speech about how they did wrong to him and how he was going to do wrong to them. He doesn't do this. He uses his position and his authority to bless them. He throws dinner parties. He sends them back with food, with more money than they came with. Joseph is modeling patience, not revenge. Here's what's so fascinating to me, too. He allowed for the regret and the shame and the guilt that the brothers had felt all these years to run its course and do its purpose, which brought them to a very different place in their own heart. We get to chapter 44. His brothers are before him, and there's this big conversation about Benjamin. Go get Benjamin. I want Benjamin here. And Judah, remember Judah was the one that suggested to sell him as a slave? Judah is now standing before Joseph, pleading with him on behalf of Benjamin. I can't let Benjamin not come back with me to go get Dad. If I get back there and he's not with me, Dad's going to lose it. He might die. Instead, use me as a slave. Take me as a slave. Can you imagine Joseph standing there watching the heart change that's happened in Judah? Chapter 45. Joseph couldn't control himself anymore. By the way, before this verse, there's all these times where he would get to a moment like that with his brothers and he just couldn't take it anymore, and he'd run out and weep. It just said that he would go find a place alone and he'd weep and he'd weep and he'd weep, and they'd come back and talk to the brothers. Next interchange, same thing. He'd get to this point, I can't handle it anymore, and he goes and he weeps. This time he can't stand it anymore. The brothers are standing before him and he shouted, "Have everyone leave me." So there was no one with him when Joseph decided to make himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it and the household of Pharaoh heard about it. That is some serious weeping. Joseph weeps for his brothers before him and all the things that God has done in and through their hearts and through his heart. He reveals himself. He says, "I'm Joseph. Is Dad still alive?" is his first question. Tell me Dad's still alive. But his brothers couldn't answer. They're terrified in his presence. And then Joseph said to his brothers, "Please, come closer to me." He invites them closer. And they came closer, more vulnerable. And he said, "I'm your brother, Joseph, whom you sold to Egypt." And without skipping a beat, this is what he says. "Now do not be grieved or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here, for God has sent me ahead of you to save lives." The famine has been in this land 2 years. There's 5 more to go. So, God sent me ahead of you to ensure for you a remnant on earth and to keep you alive by a great deliverance. Now, therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh and a lord of all his household and a ruler over all the land of Egypt, which represented provision to literally keep people alive with food. Here's another gift in the middle of rejection, the long haul of rejection. Perspective. God gives you perspective. I don't like this one. I'm not usually asking for it in the moment. But if I keep entrusting myself to the Lord, he does. He changes my perspective. Again, we can see how Joseph had every reason within his bones to have revenge and anger and bitterness and contempt on his brothers. He could have laid it on really thick and it would have made sense. And he didn't do that. He didn't choose contempt. He didn't give in to bitterness. Bitterness sounds really tempting in the moment. It sounds really good to get bitter. But it always overpromises and underdelivers. It's never going to deliver what it promises, that you would feel better. It doesn't. Maybe for a brief moment it feels good to get it off your chest, to be bitter and hold contempt over somebody else. It's always lying to you. Joseph didn't do this, even though I'm sure it probably would have felt right, like some sense of justice, if you will, for him to yell at his brothers. He doesn't do this. He doesn't take revenge. He allows room for God to do the work in the other person. God is very intentional about when and if he chooses revenge. That's why he wants it. He says, vengeance is mine. It's not for you. He's a better judge, by the way, than we are. We're really glad that he is, and we can entrust ourselves to him. The wisdom of God and the redemption of a long-term story being unfolded is something that we can trust ourselves to God himself with. So if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling like there is still bitterness in me, there's contempt that's unresolved in me, and I don't know where to go with it, here's my suggestion. Pray this prayer. God, what do you have left to change in me? Because I feel stuck. We all know there are some people that the older they grow, the more crabby they grow. They're angry at the world. They're just ticked off about everything. That's a heart that has contempt and bitterness that has not been touched by the Father. That's not been submitted to let God do the work within. Now, it's not overnight. But if you will allow the Holy Spirit in your life to hit on some of these areas and change your perspective, contempt can be turned into compassion. Your anger can be turned into love. Joseph pleads with the brothers, go get dad. Hurry. He says hurry twice. Go get dad. Bring him back here to this place. I'll send chariots with you and provisions. Just go. Go get dad. I want him back here. And then as this kind of scene comes to a close, you have Joseph fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and he wept. And Benjamin wept on his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept on them. I assume not on the lips, but I don't know. I got to ask Zach about that one. Maybe on the cheek. And afterward, his brothers talked with him. Conversations about what's happened the last 13 plus years. Here's what's happened in us. Tell us what's happened with you. Another gift that Joseph got in this rejection, and I think we have for us as well, is to choose to love. You don't have to. God doesn't force this to happen. But if you allow God to work in your heart, you have a choice to love those that have rejected you, wounded you, and caused much harm in you. I'd like to say I've chosen that more often than not. I can't. Some of those things still have to be worked through in my heart, and I feel like I have a perspective that needs to be heard. What if I kept entrusting myself to God and choose to love when those moments arise? To let our hearts be tender toward others, still longing for a restored relationship, not killing the desire, but allowing room. And as far as it's up to us, as far as it was up to Joseph, he made sure that anything he could do to work toward restored relationship, he did. That's for us. If there's something left for you to do toward restoring a relationship, that's on you, that's on me. The brothers go back, they convince Jacob to come to Egypt, and God even gives Jacob a dream and says, yes, go to Egypt, it's true, Joseph is alive, you'll see him, and then it says that Joseph will close your eyes. He'll be with the son that he thought was dead before he dies himself. How gracious of God. Chapter 46, Joseph prepared his chariot. He went up to meet his dad for the first time in all these years. And as soon as he appeared to him, Joseph threw himself on his neck and wept on his neck a long time. What's with all the weeping on the neck? We were talking about this before service. Here's a thought. That's one of the most vulnerable places that a person has. If you're going to kill somebody, somebody's out for revenge, going for the neck is where you're going to go. Sorry to be so graphic, but that's a very vulnerable place. You don't give your neck to somebody that you don't trust. They're weeping on each other's necks. Talk about restored relationship. Jacob's like, I can die now. I've seen my son that I thought was dead. I've seen his face. I see that he's still alive. It's like such an amazing moment for Jacob. How gracious of God. I know it doesn't always happen in full. I know some of the relationships will never come to this point. It takes both parties doing a lot of heart work. There's repentance. There's apologies. There's all kinds of stuff. I understand not every story is going to end up this way, but I hope what it awakens in you is there is something that I can do. Is there something that I can do to forgive, to release things to the Lord, to trust God in ways I haven't trusted Him before? And when given the moment for revenge or to choose to love, would I choose love? I hope so. Jacob passes away. Chapter 50. When Joseph's brothers seen that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us? Remember all that? He wants to pay us back in full for all the wrong in which we did to him. So they sent instructions to Joseph saying, remember what Dad said? Remember what Dad said before he died? He said, whatever you say to Joseph, please forgive, I beg you, the offense of your brothers and their sin for what they did to you that was wrong. And now, please forgive the offense of the servants of God and of your father. Joseph weeps again when they spoke to him, and his brothers also came, and they fall down before him, bowing down again. And they're like, behold, we are your servants. And Joseph's like, don't be afraid. Am I in God's place? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring about this present result to keep many people alive. So therefore, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones. So he comforted them, and he spoke kindly to them. So much to learn from, and to not only watch him as a model, but also for our own sake, what can change and what can happen in us to be more like Joseph. A final gift to remember is that a forgiving heart grows within you. It can. It's not automatic. We have to cooperate. When you're feeling all kinds of painful things, especially in rejection, a forgiving heart can grow within you by the help of God's Spirit and from Him giving you a different perspective, having yourself grounded and regrounded in Him, things can change. Joseph reminds me a lot of Jesus, and it doesn't do it justice, but here's just a few of the ways in which going through this story reminded me of who Jesus is. They were both misunderstood. They were both tempted but resisted. God established both of them, not by their own measures, but by the hand of the Lord. They were both deserted and rejected. When given the chance, they didn't defend themselves. They kept entrusting themselves to the one who judges righteously. They were stripped of their garments. They were taken away as slaves, and yet they wept for the ones who harmed them. They were plotted against. Let's kill him. Let's crucify him. And yet they still moved toward those that rejected them and offered them relationship. Forgave those who wronged them. Even Jesus on the cross saying, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Let me pray. God, would you give us a heart of not just a quick forgiveness, but would you do the work within us to get to the place where we are actually choosing love because of what you've done in our hearts and in our lives? God, would you give us hope around situations that feel too impossible, dead? There's no hope left. Would you give us some hope of change even in our own attitudes, that the temptation of bitterness and contempt and anger would not overtake us, but somehow something would soften in us, and we would be present and available for the moments where relationships around us can actually be enhanced. Help us bypass the opportunities where we want to say, I told you so, and prove our case. Help us to trust you and trust that you're working in and through us for something that's much greater than revenge. Thank you for your goodness. We trust you. Help us trust